All right, everyone, welcome back to House Government Operations and Military Affairs. It is Friday, May 22nd, just after 11 a.m. We are hearing an amendment to S 278 cannabis bill from Representative Tagliavia. It is posted to the page. Representative is in the witness chair. Sir, how are you?
Okay, Mike Taglia, State Rep Orange One. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the GovOps Committee. Shall I read my amendment first and then give you my concerns?
Sure.
The first instance of amendment is strikes out section 5, 7 VSA, subsection 912 in its entirety and inserts in lieu thereof section 5 to read as follows: deleted. Second instance in section 29 repeals it's by striking out subsection C in its entirety. Subsection C has sort of been the repeal of the events permit. The reason I'm bringing my amendment is public safety concerns. Not just for minors, but public safety in general. Knowing that what we know about, especially the CBD edibles, that they do take time to take effect. I imagine it also has to do with your metabolism and things like that. If there is an event where there are multiple purveyors, how would a purveyor or a server be able to determine if someone is intoxicated or has had too much and then be prevented from leaving an event to prevent maybe a motor vehicle accident where someone was severely injured or killed? With respect to bartenders serving alcohol, bartenders can be held responsible if someone who's visibly intoxicated, if they serve them and then they leave a premise and there is bodily harm or some sort of an accident. And I'm curious, how is public safety upheld with that same respect, given the lack of ability to see or know how long some of these CBD gummies, for instance, would take effect to someone? If there are multiple purveyors in a venue at one of these events, someone could very easily go from one purveyor to another and maybe take samples and not realize that this stuff would take time to take effect. And by the time it does, would they already be on the road and be a risk?
I just have a clarifying question where you keep referring to it as CBD, which is not intoxicating. It's THC, I think.
THC. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, that's, yeah, the THC, yes. And the other question is, would there be sampling of products that are smokable? And then how, because we don't have any real accurate ways of testing for intoxication, if someone again was to leave and be involved in, say, a motor vehicle accident, how could, where does the liability, because there is a section dealing with insurance. My question is, where does the liability lie? Because if there is at this particular event numerous purveyors, who then is actually, or is there any liability on the venue or any of the purveyors? How would we go about that if there were numerous purveyors? The other, and lastly, from 2012 to 2021, we've gone from 2 to 26 poisonings of children ages 0 to 5 and 6 to 12. And my concern is, how are the venues going to be secured from minors and children? Would they be barred at the entrance to the venue, or would each purveyor need to be checking IDs and being certain that nobody under the age of 21 had any of these cannabis products available to them.
Okay, so I guess within that, are those statements or questions?
Questions?
Okay. Because we're just kind of speaking to the amendment right now,
Okay,
right? I mean, there are safeguards in place for ID checks that it should be us representatives.
That's what I was wondering. I don't know if it's you or ledge council or the presenter of the bill, but we do have a security plan. Isn't that, as I was wondering if maybe we could talk about that just to show that that is part of the bill.
Yeah.
I know that that made me feel better about this.
Correct. Yeah.
That's
So
the
we're,
place that we did have the security plan as part of it.
so I guess we could bring council up to address the questions that you're
Big
asking.
bill, so I know it. Yeah, just wanted to
well, I
highlight.
saw the security plan. I was just, is that something that both the municipality and any law enforcement would need to be made aware of first?
Representative Wood, reporter of the bill.
For all of the requirements for the events, for a permit to be issued, the CCB would need to approve it. And the local control commission or the legislative body of the municipality would also need to approve all of the requirements to issue a permit.
Very much parallels what we do for alcohol-based festivals, and that's of a similar nature.
Okay,
We're conscious to do a similar overlay to this existing structure for Rivers festivals, wine festivals, etc.
well, I guess that question is pretty much answered. The other is just the liability for if there's sampling of whether it's smokable products or edible products, how does the liability fall there, and how is someone prevented from leaving who would be intoxicated and potentially cause harm or death after leaving one of these?
I guess there is an insurance requirement provision, and that is on the folks who are there for the event. So it is a retail establishment that currently, so the practices within that is also within how they train their staff. They also train them to be able to identify intoxicated individuals when they sale approach the store, and they have the ability to refuse a sale or a purchase or a sampling.
Yeah, I'm sorry, did you say
Refuse
refuse?
sampling, yeah, purchase. Yeah, if they feel someone's intoxicated, very similar to alcohol.
Well, it goes back to the original question. If these particular products do take time to take effect.
We wrestled with that same question with alcohol. It metabolizes differently with people based on body size, body mass, all the variable indexes. We do have drug recognition officers that are trained within law enforcement, and the ability to take a sampling of a lead test does exist in statute if someone is deemed intoxicated.
Not sure that with the time that these take to take effect from what I've been able to find. Not sure that I guess all of these events are going to be for different time periods. So my question is if there's samples and all of these do take time to take effect. I mean, and if someone is to stop at 3 different vendors and sample edibles at 3 different vendors and then
Yes,
walk around
talking about the consumption of a regulated intoxicated product, and if an adult makes a bad decision, I mean, it's kind of like alcohol as well. Adults make bad decisions.
That is true. That is true. I guess that was all the questions that I have, the reasons for my amendment.
There you go.
Thank you. So just to be clear, your questions were to reinforce why you brought the amendment. to us.
That's correct. That's correct.
But your amendment is just to simply remove ability to hold events.
Yes. But the one other thing is that if the, I'm gonna call them brick and mortar, but the dispensaries, they generally are like an enclosed area like this with an entrance and an exit. The events, maybe, I don't know if they're, I don't recall reading in there, but in the bill, if they would be laid out like this, or would they be open air, and how more restrictive? With a brick and mortar, people can't just go, they're not one right next to the other. That would also prevent people being able to sample or even purchase enough of an amount to be in violation once they leave. That was another thing. There's a provision in the bill. See if I can find this real quick. With the possession limits. If there's going to be sales, will the sales be, the amounts be the same as if it was at the actual dispensary? And with the same question arises, could someone go, I think the limit is 2 ounces, say for cannabis. Walk, if there's say 10 dispensaries at this public event, walk to 5 different ones, purchase 2 ounces at each. If a purchaser was to leave the event, would they not be in violation of the law? And as they're going, could there be something at the event to, or would there be something to prevent someone leaving in violation like that?
So my understanding with this, we left a lot of room for rulemaking authority within CCB as they work towards these. I mean, I'm scanning the bill right now. I mean, we're kind of getting off target to the underlying amendment, but as far as like the boundaries, and you're making the overlay of the brick and mortar space, there would be if it were outdoor with tents like a brew fest, and this would have defined areas where all of this transaction and consumption would occur. So anything outside of that boundary would be in a violation of the event licensure.
I think what he's getting at, is bottom line is somebody can't exceed what we've got in the bill for possession. They could not legally walk out, like for instance, with more
I would
than,
defer that nuance to council.
I believe that's the way I would
I
interpret.
mean, like if it were up to that, yeah, it's the
Yeah.
same kind of.
Yeah, it would have the same guardrails are there for that. I mean, and that's, now you're breaking the law if you're
Correct.
doing
Or
that,
could be a violation of the retail
Yes.
license.
if that helps.
Correct point.
In my head, I just kind of compared it to right now, if you were to go to a regular dispensary and purchase an ounce, and then go to another dispensary and purchase another ounce, that would be a violation.
And sometimes we have those on the same block. I mean, there's 2 dispensaries in Montpelier that are within probably 150 yards of each other.
Under current.
Yeah, I'm talking about
Under
current
current,
statute, yeah,
current,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So like similar to, or we're proposing in the bill of an event, going to multiple places.
Is that a hand wrap, Calvin?
Yes,
Okay.
just because I'm trying to get a clarification here, because with the edible when they consume edibles at the event, because the event does say consumption. So what you were asking about with the metabolism time of that, if someone were to, as one of your concerns, metabolism time of an edible, it's not something you would inhale.
Yes.
If someone
Yes.
sampled multiple edibles,
Multiple samples and then become intoxicated shortly after leaving the event. Where does the liability lie? Like I said, there is liability for someone, say a bartender with alcohol, but if the person leaves prior to these edibles being metabolized and then have the effects. I'm just curious, if they're found to be suspected to be under the influence of a cannabis product, then which, if a vendor was to be held responsible, which one? How do you determine that? Is there a way? Or would it fall on the venue?
It's, if they haven't kicked in yet, the vendor wouldn't know.
Right. And
Okay.
Rogers Evans.
Thank you. I'm wondering why someone other than the person who has made the error in consumption needs to be held liable.
I guess that question would be asked with respect to the service of alcohol as well, because we have that.
Right, so if
Mhm.
I mean, I wouldn't, let's say, a random person were at home and they drank too much alcohol and then they got in a car and drove somewhere, that person, it is liable for the decision that they made, not, the company that made the thing they drank or the store that sold it to them. So I think there are,
Well,
well, if I bought it at the 802 liquor store, can you sue 802 liquor for selling me vodka that I then misused at a later date?
There was a case in Enosburg where someone was sold beer at a convenience store and that convenience store was held liable. Yes, because they got in an accident and killed someone. This was a while ago.
That's not a regular occurrence.
Oh, no, it's very rare, but Dram Shop does apply.
Okay, so, I guess the reason for my question is that I understand that it's particular to this event where the point might be the actual consumption, but I wonder if there's a way to solve or to resolve your concerns without just getting rid of the events altogether.
I wonder that as well. I would like to see that my concern allayed. I don't know how that's possible, given the delayed effects. Especially because it would, I'm not sure exactly the premise behind the events. But if it is to sell products, whether they be for benefits of whatever they may be, then like other venues, if there's sampling going on, I mean, it's one thing to go to a food court and take samples. Overeat, it's one thing, but if you overindulge as in alcohol or with CBD products, it's a problem when there's intoxication. And that's, like I said, the public safety is the driver.
Yeah. Huh. That's interesting.
Hooper.
So what I'm hearing is you are suggesting like we need to apply dram shop laws to cannabis. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's what I'm saying. And I'm not sure that the events are covered under that.
I can understand the suggestion, that makes sense to me, but I guess my question to you is, do you believe that dram shop laws are sturdy and should?
I don't know enough about them. I don't know enough about them.
Maybe we have a dram shop
I mean,
conversation. in the
this
future.
committee and judiciary do Dram Shop
Yeah.
mix.
Yeah, we do that
for
next
Sure,
time.
yeah. We do a primer every biennium.
Yeah, because I have my feelings about the laws around alcohol. So,
Yes, there's a lot of,
so I mean, we could have that. We got a whole big conversation, I think.
yes, we're just focusing to this amendment right now in the bill. I respect what you're saying because there's a lot of overlays. Totally get it.
What I'm
That's
saying,
why we try to do safety and security parallels to alcohol-based events with this because
What
we're talking about.
his suggestions is
Substances.
both sensible and sizable, such that we should probably look really right into it at a later date.
Yes. Representative.
On a similar path, I'm currently turning to the bill within section 5, subsection F1. the CCB is granted the authority to adopt procedures and rules, and they shall have the force of law and be binding to permit holders. And it makes me think of our events with alcohol, where if the event is solely focused on tasting and consumption of alcohol, there are tickets involved and bracelets and to like monitor consumption, so you're not just willy-nilly getting tastings from every single person. I'm wondering if maybe we could get feedback from the CCB and hear if maybe they would have thoughts about procedures that would be similar to alcohol events. That's kind of
Yeah,
information
yeah,
and a
we-
question and.
Yeah, no, we took testimony on that stuff, and they did speak to the fact that there is like parallel, right? Like they have the ID check, the entry points, exit points. Ticketed, right? So they know the volume of people coming out, things of that nature, but.
Mhm. Yeah, I was mostly speaking specifically to, like the tickets in exchange for a product.
Willy-nilly bracelets.
Rest of,
Probably put their importer in the bill, but one of the things about S 278 is it doesn't strip away local control. So it allows there to be flexibility for municipalities. If they feel like there is something more that they want to do, they can. There's like room, right?
Yeah,
That's
the
what I'm-
municipality needs to approve all of the requirements that also the CCB needs to approve. So I'm sure that if they were to deny a permit, they could also give feedback and say, we would maybe approve this if you adjusted. this detail."
Right.
Jeff, I'll say, sir.
Well, one other question with respect to the delayed response with the edibles and cumulative effects. I don't know what the cumulative effects of edibles are, say, for sampling. You go to an event, maybe there's 5, maybe there's 10, maybe it's 25, and somebody is walking around thinking, well, these aren't doing anything to me or for me. You keep sampling, and then all of a sudden you have this slowly cumulative effect. That's another public safety concern, especially if there's someone who is new to the products. So I understand that this is allowable in Vermont, the events to try to sell these without knowing the cumulative effects or a possible consumer not knowing. Here again, public safety and the liability. It's one thing to know, it's another to be completely new to the product and for whatever reason, have a delayed reaction, especially if it's severely delayed. Then what?
I mean, adults are using the products. I would assume most of the people who are going to this, and now you and I are both having this conversation on broad-based assumptions, right? Most of the people who would be going to this, in my humble opinion, are like a Brewers Festival. They're like really into the thing. And they're well aware of what the thing does to their body.
But I will say this is a reasonable concern. This is very reasonable. Thanks for talking.
Oh, yeah, we were talking about roadside safety, consumption, and how it metabolizes, how to measure, intoxication since before I got in here, before you got in here. So this is not a new conversation, especially in this committee, which has both the Cannabis Control Board, the adult use market, and public safety. So
Had a hand earlier.
thank you. All right,
No
Madam
worries.
Vice Chair.
I'm just going back to the municipalities having the ability to add extra protections. I personally, who have voted against cannabis bills all along for recreational purposes or adult use purposes, would like to see statewide procedures put into place that are stringent enough that municipalities won't have to have this discussion because they're not necessarily public safety experts. And many of them don't have their own municipal public safety enforcement officers. So also on the topic of adult use cannabis in general, it is a very complex statute. Folks who don't participate don't know a lot about it. And it's really hard to understand the nuances of the laws, just as liquor laws are the same way. It's very difficult to understand, and Vermont has probably the strictest regulatory environment when it comes to these two vices, and I'm going to call them vices here. Because so Vermont has some of the strictest laws in the country, and that's a good thing from a public safety standpoint. But I have always been concerned about public safety in open air environments when an individual is allowed to have an open container or is allowed to be consuming on the premises. So I find this to be a very reasonable request, this amendment. As you all know, when we voted on the bill, I was one of two people voting no because of the events permits that are allowed. And this is not new. We had the same scenario on May 30th last year. So if you all recall, we adopted Rep. Harrison's amendment last year on May 29th that eliminated the events permits. So I just wanted to say that. I know there are people in the room who have either been public safety officers themselves or who work in substance misuse prevention. And this is a really serious issue. So I just want us to give Rep. Tagliavia's amendment serious consideration, please. Thank you.
I got Morgan, then I got Scully.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for bringing the amendment forward. In committee, I was the one that brought up the compromise. We were at 10 events to 5. With some of the similar concerns. So to try to mitigate it to at least in the spirit of compromise, bring it down to that. But I'll support this for the sake of getting it to the whole body so that we could have a dialogue there.
Representative Scully, and then I'm going to ask council to come up for a question in that representative.
Honorable Chairman, has the question of liability before come up and whose liability it might be, and what we're talking about when we talk about liability and the channels that it can follow. We have legal counsel here. There are 2 issues in liability. One is the criminal liability. The other is civil liability and injuries to people because of the intoxicant who was operating a motor vehicle or behaving in such a way as that personal injury to an innocent bystander occurred. I don't mean to put you in a difficult space, but there are those 2 bodies of law. One is very specific, criminal. Civil law, a preponderance of evidence, which means you don't have to have an affidavit of facts necessarily in the same way you would in the criminal proceeding.
Like tort.
Yeah. Am I close to being right, counsel?
Council, why don't you go up to the table for a hot minute? Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. You're a hero.
Good morning, Sophie Zadatny for the Office of Legislative Counsel. Do you want me to start with question from here?
What the chair would like.
Yes, you want the chair.
Go for it, sorry.
So.
Any moving parts today?
Yeah, so on the criminal front, I mean, there isn't the same dram shop liability for cannabis use. My understanding, and this is from a while ago, so it may be out of date now, but I think the challenge has been in identifying when somebody is impaired due to cannabis. If you're driving negligently and, you know, cause an injury or whatever, I think there are probably still criminal laws that would apply. And then on the civil front, yeah, I mean, you'd be looking at a personal injury tort. And it would come down to, you know, what the evidence would show. I'm sure there'd be discovery around where were you beforehand, what did you consume and all that stuff to show that somebody was impaired at the time of an accident. I mean, you've kind of heard about the amendment, but I can put it back up again.
Well, and the component about serving amounts and et cetera at the events itself, I believe we gave the CCB the discretion to establish that in the rulemaking process.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful just to go back to the bill as passed out by this committee. So the event permit, and again, the board, we're limited number of permits. It goes through the eligibility, you have to be in good standing. And then, I mean, this has already come up, but the establishment has received written approval from the local Cannabis Control Commission or the municipal legislative body if there is no local Cannabis Control Commission. And they can impose conditions and limitations that are appropriate to protecting the public, managing traffic and abating nuisance. That there be a security plan to ensure that intoxicated persons or persons under 21 years of age cannot exercise the space subject to the permit, that the premises are secured from diversion or inversion, and that the premises lawfully may be used for the purpose intended. A product sale plan describing quantities and types of cannabis and products, how they'll be transported, monitored. That's more on the retailer's end of things. That the event permit holder has capacity to administer and enforce the required plans. And confirmation the applicant has secured the services of a county law enforcement agency or private security provider, if required by the board. Again, proof of commercially reasonable insurance for the proposed event, and then compliance with any other health and safety requirements that the board may prescribe. So again, we've got the 5 permits, the different of each, the different limits there. And I did just want to flag again, the board shall adopt procedures to govern the event permits. They're going to, again, try and issue them equitably among cannabis establishment license categories. And then, so again, this is all going to be subject to the force of law. And again, in section 10, the Cannabis Control Board is going to be issuing rulemaking, and they will also be submitting a written report concerning the event permit. So again, this is conceived as a 2-year pilot. And they're going to be assessing the benefits, challenges, and administrative viability of the event permit program, best practices for security, inventory tracking, tax enforcement, etc. So yeah, I think the anticipation is if, you know, lessons learned, whether or not to move forward with it. If they do move forward, are there other provisions that should be in state law to govern that?
My question's a little more just technical, but in sections 7, 8, and 9, they relate to the sales and taxation of cannabis products at events. Would that also need to be grouped in?
Yes, I think that would probably make sense because those provisions 7, 8, 9, and 10 are all specific to the out event permit program. So yes, I mean, you wouldn't need those if the permit pilot program goes away.
Representative Evans, with apologies for skipping you over.
I'm deeply offended, thank you.
Your offense is offending me.
What would the reasonably something insurance,
Commercially reasonable.
commercially reasonable insurance, would that cover the liability that the that's a concern. Is that what that covers?
Probably would
What
be
the
a question for the
insurance
Cannabis Control Board. I believe that all cannabis establishments are required to have commercially reasonable insurance.
Yeah,
But I don't know specifically what that would cover, but I would imagine if you're holding an event, or again, I mean, if you're a retail establishment, I would assume that your insurance to be commercially reasonable would be covering those
Right.
kinds of issues, right? Individuals who have a reaction.
Yeah.
Behave badly, whatever, as a result. But I don't know the details of what's available
sure.
on that.
Thank you. So that seems like in some way it addresses the issue if they're required to have insurance for the event.
And that was one of the things where this conversation started like 4 years ago, was actually finding insurance carriers that were willing to write for an event like this.
Right.
And that was one of the things that stalled it out 4 years ago, but now there's insurance carriers that are in the marketplace. There you go.
I do remember that. That still doesn't alleviate my discomfort with events because anybody can have insurance, but you can still be driving under the influence of a substance, whether it be alcohol or cannabis, THC, and do harm to people, or you could destroy property, etc. Yes, the monetary benefit will get paid out to the victims, but this is about it could be about human lives, and money does not change when someone is killed or injured, or property is injured. Sometimes that doesn't, or property is damaged, sometimes that doesn't even cover it. So that is my concern. All the money in the world can't fix it if something really tragic happens. So insurance to me is, it's a thing, sure, but it doesn't solve all the problems.
Yeah. As a former license holder for alcohol, yes, liability insurance is definitely a thing.
Yeah.
Mm.
Rev Waters Evans.
Just speaking of the bill in general, or the amendment in general.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. I was
Not
like,
the
wait,
bill in
what?
general. Yeah, but we're done with that. That went too
Like
far.
we're popping that hood?
No, because, well, in reference to the
Yes,
bill in
yes.
general, we, I feel like, when we voted on this a couple days ago, was it a couple days ago? I felt comfortable then with the parameters that we put around events. I felt comfortable with the limits we put on the municipalities, with the insurance, with the making sure there was public safety there. And I felt then and still feel today like we reached a good point with the events that made them palatable and seemed like that it was okay to do so. Also, I understand Rep. Hangel's point. Yes, it's like when people use substances and then, harm comes to other people because of that choice. It's not okay. It's devastating. It's also, I know that there's not a direct comparison to alcohol, but still, if we have legalized the substance, we have legalized alcohol, both are substances that can alter one's behavior. Prescription drugs can alter a person's behavior, and it's really up to the people who are consuming them to use them responsibly. And I don't know, I feel like removing these events because we want to prevent all the harm in the world is not going to achieve that, even though it would be great if we could do that. And I'm with all due respect to Rep. Tagliavia, I understand the intent behind this, and maybe sometime in the future we can talk about once this gets going and there are some events, maybe we can use the check back to see how things went afterward and make adjustments. But for now, I feel okay with the bill as we passed it, and I don't see a need to remove the events and support the amendment. That's where I stand on this.
Rob Goff.
I mean, again, I was one of the ones that voted no because of the events. And Rep. Taglavia, the amendment, removing the events, some of the questions, the same thoughts I had, are with the consumption of edibles. And here's my problem with it. We talk about an accident, oh, well, they have ways to check if you were impaired. But considering the number of fatalities in this state that we had just last year with suspected drug use because they cannot tell when you consumed it with THC because it stays in the system for so long. So in these accidents we talked about, if somebody kills themselves and kills others, well, there was THC, it could have been a contributing factor. It might have been, it might not have been because, well, we don't know how long it's been in the system because it stays there. So I worry that you can accidentally overconsume. And again, these events are to increase sales and advertise and expand and show off our craft cannabis market. Well, that's going to attract non-users. People that are, oh, well, let me try it. Let me see what this event's about. That worries me because you could accidentally overconsume in those situations. This hasn't done anything for me. This hasn't done anything for me. You start driving home and no. And you have a accident. The idea of with a bar, and we have the dram shops, the bar rules. Well, yeah, if you're serving an obviously intoxicated person, but in an event and with a product that can take an hour or 2 hours to affect someone, how do you know if you're over serving somebody? So this amendment would address a lot of my concerns. There's parts of the bill I do support. So I'd be in favor of this amendment, at least get it to the floor and let the discussion be held there on a body of 150 people instead of 11 of us.
I agree.
Where's Evans?
I have a question maybe for you, Chair Byron or Rep. Whiten. What about the information that's required to be is distributed or displayed at the events regarding the types of products? Like, isn't there?
They also need to have an approved product sale plan that describes the quantities and types of cannabis and how the cannabis will be transported, monitored, secured, displayed, and sold in conformity with state law. Right?
And again, on top of what you have in the bill, there's also rulemaking, right? So the CCB will be issuing rules around this prior to doing the permits as well.
And that could increase the restrictions on, or, the information, the requirements on the.
I would assume they would be looking at sort of more details on exactly how it would work.
I would also like to say that we had a similar proposal in last year's bill that was removed as a floor amendment from Representative Harrison. And just for the sake of the arc of time and the totality of the work on the subject matter, that this is a far more cerebral and refined proposal than what we had last year. And a lot of those concerns that were brought up in that moment have been addressed here. So this is a far more honed bill.
I know we're running out of time. I'm sure we want to get a vote so we get out of here, but real quick.
Well, I think we're waiting on Chair Pepper as well.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Pepper's en route.
Gotcha. This would be retailers only, right? We wouldn't be lumping in the wholesalers companies too.
Yes.
Right now, it's anybody anybody with a license issued by the CCB that's in good standing
Oh, okay.
And that they continue to comply with underlying license requirements.
And I think they're anticipating it won't be like laboratories and stuff, but it would be, right, it could be growers.
So we'd have an opportunity for a grower to show up.
But they would be held under the same guidelines, yeah. In standards. So. Any other questions, or should we break for a couple of minutes till Mr. Comer gets here? Okay. Nick, take us off until the chair